Good afternoon. I welcome you to the Rules and City Government Committee. Note for the record, Alderman Chandlemeyer and Alderman Arnett are present. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, I'd like to amend the agenda.
Okay.
I would like to postpone action 02623 and 0324.
Okay.
Second that.
All right. Are we postponing action or are we just removing it from the agenda?
Removing it from today's agenda. I apologize.
Okay. And Alderman Arnett, will you second that?
I did, yes, second.
Okay. All in favor of removing 026 and 03 from the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the March 15th meeting.
So moved.
I believe I was absent at that meeting due to a prior commitment, so I cannot second. I apologize.
Okay, I will second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so under legislation, first item is CA1 24, Department of Central Services. I think Ms. Buckland will be able to speak to that for us, please.
Yes. So we have two different pieces of legislation in front of us related to the reconstituting of the Department of Central Services. The first of these is the charter amendment, which looks at the broad, both reporting relationships and then the broad areas of responsibility. It takes the responsibilities around fleet and facilities out of the Department of Public Works, takes procurement out of finance, and puts it under that new heading.
And there was another movement that I think the council has already amended out. Is
correct, which was the move of the City of Annapolis TV studio. That actually was not listed as a responsibility within the charter. So this actuty, looking at Cynthia for confirmation.
It's on page 2 under subsection 12B6 to administer the City of Annapolis television studio.
Oh, we added it. You're right. Didn't come out of the prior ones, but got added to this.
So, Madam Chair, I could make a Rules Committee motion to amend the Charter Amendment CA 1-24 to, on page 2, lines 17, drop item number 6 to remove the City of Annapolis television studio.
I will second the motion.
okay, so the amendment is to remove section 12B6 from the legislation.
Yes, ma'am.
All in further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Madam Chair, I move that the Rules Committee recommend favorably with the amendment that we just approved.
I will second it, but I just have a quick question for
Please.
Ms. Buckland, if that's possible. Ms. Buckland, so I guess my kind of core question on this is what's the rationale behind taking these out of the two departments and putting into this newly created one? Does that increase efficiency, we're thinking? Does that increase cost savings, time management? What's the...
It's intended to help the city respond more quickly and consistently to the issues raised around those areas. One of the things that council has heard pretty consistently throughout this budget process has been references to space needs, things like that. I know that procurement issues have come before you guys on several different fronts. And you know, the departments that these functions exist in right now, they do have a lot on their plates. And so what this will allow us to do is to have some more time and focus on those areas, help them function better, help those things move along more consistently, faster. And then hopefully all of that positions the city to be responsive to what it's trying to get done.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that.
May I?
Alderman Arnett?
The other thing that I like about it, particularly under section 12B1, it does add an element of checks and balances to do the procurement separate from the finance department. Then the finance department will review those actions. As it's happening now, it's all under one roof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'd like to add the fact that it was set up, the city formerly had a central services department. And when the economy tanked back in 08, 09, thereabouts, there were a lot of movements and elimination of offices. And so this was, how it was divided. But it worked extremely well, and Alderman Arnett can attest to it. It worked extremely well when we had a central services, because people knew where to go specifically. So we're going back in time to fix what we had kind of, I don't want to say screwed up, but yeah.
Adjusted based upon the circumstances at the time.
Yes.
Right. Well, it was made under duress. I mean, we were really feeling that we were facing bankruptcy, and we were scurrying to try to make things more efficient and pared down. And I think we made 3 big changes that we're now undoing. Office of Central Services, the subrogation of HR and IT to lower levels. And in fact, we didn't change very much the functioning of those 2 organizations. We just paid affected the pay. Mm-hmm. The responsibilities stayed the same. So I think we're recovering from that, what was a truly traumatic experience at the time.
And we had to outline for the bonding agencies what we would do. And that was one of the things, to downsize government, to reduce the number of departments that we had. And we did what we committed to doing then. And the reward is they improved our bond rating, was it last year or the year before?
Last year, I believe.
Last year. So it paid off. We did what we had to do, and they recognized it. And now we're going back to make it more efficient.
Okay. I think that sounds good. Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of CA 124 as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The next item is the Department of Central Services. This is the ordinance that actually puts this department into the city code. CA was the charter, now we're on the code. So is there further discussion? Ms. Buckland, is there anything to add about this one?
I'm looking to the existing ordinance, original ordinance, also references the television video studio operations in under A, overall services. And so an amendment to remove that reference would probably be in order.
Where did you say it was?
Page 3.
Yeah, it's on
I'm on
page
page
3,
three,
line
14.
Oh, I see, line 14. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we want to amend that out.
So, Madam Chair, I'll make a similar amendment offering of deleting line 14 on page 3 of the ordinance.
I will second. I'll second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Further discussion on the ordinance? Hearing none, all in favor of 0824 as amended, the Department of Central Services, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
So that was to recommend favorable with amendment?
yes. Is that what I said? Favorable with amendment?
I believe so.
Okay. And then we go on to 0924, changes in exempt service job classifications. Ms. Buckland, I'm sorry. I used to work with the Buckley.
So this particular ordinance then revises the listing of exempt classifications within the within city code. Instead of the original listing, so within the pay plan, we had taken the A scale and separated that into represented and non-represented. So the represented stayed with an A designation. The non-represented moved to an N designation. This particular ordinance carries that distinction through then for the exempt classifications. So instead of their A, instead of like the very first line, A10, replaces it with N10. So there are no changes to the classifications. I believe there is an amendment on the table which in the original, the existing original for the department directors had the E scale. The proposed amendment removes that, keeps them back on the original scale, but on N. Oh. So it doesn't actually change any classifications. It just puts them on the correct pay plan designator.
I am trying to see how the amendment, the Buckley Amendment on page 2 differs from the language that was in the legislation originally.
The E's get changed to N's.
Yeah, the E's got changed to N's. Correct. So the first, if you're looking at the amendment, the first place where there's now a difference is the human resources manager. Originally had been an A10. In the original legislation, it was going to be replaced with E2. This amendment replaces that with N19, or instead of A19, it would instead go to N19.
Okay, there's not a consistent list. It kind of, but.
Yeah, you should be able to look down the list, and anywhere where there was originally an A, there should now be an N, but with the same number. The only one that's not like that is obviously the Director of Central Services, who's actually being added outright to this list. And so that becomes an N.
And of course, police and fire.
Correct.
Are on the list, but they have a different.
Correct. They would have, so they were originally starting with F and P, which is what they were on before, and they've gone back to that. So they would stay on those respective scales.
Yeah.
Which is getting added entirely.
Okay, I just needed to see them side by side. Yep. Thank you.
But even with the amendment, if I may, Madam Chair, it keeps the Director of HR and IT, I'm not using its correct name, Office of Integrated Technology Solutions at N19, so they're staying at the 19 level. I'm trying to find where the deputy OEM is.
That's not actually listed here in the exempt service. So not everyone who is on the N scale is listed here. We have a lot of different folks on the N scale.
So if I might ask, because that is a particular classification that has drawn some scrutiny, is there a change in the classification for, or pay level for the director of, and do we know what that level is?
No, there are no changes proposed here for any of the classifications. So where everyone is right now is where they would stay.
Okay. When we, if I might, just one follow-up. When we get the class and comp study, will that be proposing some classification changes?
I anticipate that it probably will propose some classification changes, but that will be dealt with then. And I'm sure that will be a whole conversation
Oh, I'm sure.
with council.
Alderman Chandler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alderman Arnett, I apologize if I was misunderstanding your question, but I am actually seeing the Director of the Office of Emergency Management on here.
No, I'm talking about the deputy.
Okay. I was misunderstanding your question, and I apologize.
I apologize for the lack of clarity, but, so, Madam Chair, if we could have some discussion.
Yeah, because I have some questions, but you go, please.
Well, to me, I think that the amendment does what this was initially intended to do when we were creating a new, I call it SES scale, because that's what I'm familiar with. So we're retreating from that until we get further analysis. And so it looks like everybody is staying where they are. And many are getting an N in front of their name for the non-represented. But other than that, there's no change in classification.
That's what it appears. But I have a question, and I know this is going to be kind of sensitive, but the city manager is listed here as an assistant city manager, I'm sorry, is listed as an N18, as opposed to is your title deputy?
No,
Assistant.
I'm the assistant city manager.
You're-
Jackie Guile is the deputy.
So so you're an 18,
Correct.
but you have other departments over which you supervise.
I only supervise one area at this point, which is the Office of Community Services.
So to whom does the IT department answer?
All of those departments answer to the city manager. I know that there have been some discussions about, in other jurisdictions, you sometimes will see a kind of a division, a little bit of a division of labor, because often the city manager then ends up with a pretty wide span of control. And a division then amongst like the assistant city managers, deputy city managers. One of them might be focused on administrative departments, one might be focused on public safety departments or whatever. That's not the arrangement we have here in the city of Annapolis. And certainly if that were something that we were to seriously contemplate, I'm sure that would require a conversation with council, because just as we made some changes to add the director of central services, the code actually specifies who that reports to, and that's the kind of thing would have to be changed.
Does the code not specify, and maybe you said this and I'm just not clear, does the code not specify to whom HR answers? I thought we changed that to the city manager. I don't know.
Yes, I believe, let me go verify, but I believe they report, all those folks report to the city manager, yeah.
I just find it hard to understand the assistant city manager being an N18 and really does practically oversee the other departments, not the major departments, but the other offices, I should say, not departments, because they're not departments. So that's one concern that I have. If we changed, well, let me try to state this correctly. We have an interest in making those offices departments. I have an interest. I think it's a shared interest by others. How does that go about? Would we be able to make the first step by changing this?
That is a good question. I'm not sure I know the full answer to that. This certainly is what I believe governs the grade that these positions are at. Whether that would be, so changing this would certainly be a necessary step. The part that I'm unsure of is whether it is a sufficient step. Obviously, the desire at this point for us is to sort of stay at the status quo and get to the other side of that class and comp study when we can talk about, you know, what's the philosophy of how grading is done, and we have some consistency there.
Okay, Alderman Arnett?
My eyes are old and feeble, but I don't see the city manager on either the ordinance or the amendment.
No, the city manager position and pay is set in a different part of code. So that's actually not affected by this.
So the city attorney is set by this, but not the city manager.
Correct.
And the city attorney does not report to the city manager. The assistant city attorney is an N, under the new scale, N20. The deputy for resilience is an N20. The assistant is a N18. Am I? Okay. And where in the budget do we pass or consider the budget for the city manager?
That's, I'm actually going to turn to Cynthia, if you've got, you can pull up the code section that addresses the city manager position.
I thought that the city manager is under a contract. Not that he's a contract employee, but he's under a contract which stipulates the conditions of employment and benefits and the like. Unlike, I mean, I guess all of our directors are under a contract, but with him, in essence, with the city manager.
Yeah. It's a different process than for anyone else. Yeah.
Because you remember, we learned that they get different benefits.
Yeah, that 401.
401k, right?
Well, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't a 401.
403 or something.
Yeah.
403A or something like that.
Yeah.
And have been getting it for a while without our knowledge.
Well, I think that was part of the negotiated agreement that they have.
Right.
And so we don't have any hands-on with that. Not to say that we should.
So I would submit that this is something that I will be very interested in seeing when we do get the classification and compensation study, because it does feel like the city manager, we have these strange three-headed monster in the city. We have the mayor, who's also the chief executive officer, who gets an N10 or something like that, almost as bad as us. And then we have the city manager, but then we also have the city attorney, often another place. And then we really have three big departments, police, fire, and public works. And so I'm hopeful when we see the class and comp study that will get into the rationale for those very strange separate ways of treating our senior management. But as far as I can see, Madam Chair, with the amendment, we are simply making things that were formerly A's into N's that are now in the non-aligned, not changing pay. And remember, when you look at an A18 or even an A20, there's still a range within that scale. So an A18 might be at the low end in one place and at the high end at another. But it feels to me, in my assessment, that this accomplishes what we were told was going to be in the budget.
I think you're right. The changes have been made that we spoke about. I guess my question now is, who qualifies for this list? Because I'm looking at the recruitment employee relations person, or the position, I'm sorry, or the police professional standards manager, or the special projects and arts administrator. How do they get on this list? Did we do that during the previous, I don't want to say budget process, because we didn't deal with it with this level of detail? But you understand what I'm asking? They just don't seem to fit with the directors and the managers and all of that. Not to demean what they're doing, but.
Yeah, I would need to consult with both the HR manager and with, kind of legislative history of when and why certain positions are on there, not others. You can certainly find out.
I'm sure that's an HR question, but I'm also equally as sure that employees who are watching, and they do, are thinking, why am I not on this list? Or why isn't somebody else on this
You're on
list?
another list, employee.
So anyway, we should just have the answers, that's all.
I hope we, when we finally do see the class and comp, we'll be able to come back to some of these same questions. That will come to the Rules Committee, so we will have the opportunity. And that's why the Rules Committee is such a fun committee to be on. Madam Chair, I would move that the Rules Committee accept amendment number 1.
Second.
Okay, and further discussion? I would still like to raise the question about this assistant city manager being an 18 and not a 19. But that may be a battle for another day.
Yeah,
But
that's the class and comp.
yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 I move that we recommend favorably on 0924 with the Buckley amendment.
As amended, thank you.
As amended.
I will second.
Okay.
I do have a quick point of discussion, though, if I may,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Alderman.
I apologize, this is a goofy question. I go back and forth, but I just want to make sure I get this explained to me clearly. So this all matches the upcoming budget, but do we have a weird cart versus horse situation here by putting this forward before the budget is formally passed on Monday? Or do we have to get this done so that what we put in the budget actually matches what's in the city code?
I believe this is part of the range of legislation you guys will be looking at on Monday. So the idea is all in one night, having all of that stuff go together.
Excellent. If I can,
Correct.
to Ms. Reuter, is that correct timeline?
09 is not on Mondays, but it can certainly be on the 17th, when you'll also be finishing up on labor union contracts.
Yeah.
So with that piece of information, then, is what we pass in the budget with the new timelines, et cetera.
So
Do we have to basically get one of these done before the other, or do they both have to get done at the same time? I just want to
Well,
make sure.
none of this goes into effect until January 1st.
until the new fiscal year.
Yeah, July 1st, 4th.
So are we approving the budget on Monday or not?
Well, that remains to be seen.
It is on the agenda for Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
So this will not be on the agenda until the 17th.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Could it be
Why not?
moved to the agenda to go
At-
hand in hand with?
At this point, it can be, but the council would have to move that it be added to the agenda.
But if my understanding of what I was told about this taking effect on the fiscal year is correct, it doesn't matter if this gets past the next meeting as long as it's just done for the new fiscal year. So I had a weird timeline in my head that was corrected, so I thank you both.
Okay,
I
Alderman Arnett?
don't care whether we pass it Monday or on the 17th, but 09 is part of our budget binder. And this is amending 09 that's in our budget binder. So one would think we would want to take it up when we're taking up the rest of the budget book.
That comes to a question then is, I apologize, Madam Chair.
Please.
I guess that comes to a question then of, do we as a committee want to ask the council to suspend the rules Monday to add 0924 to the agenda?
There is another sticking point on this one. It also needs to be approved by the Finance Committee, which it hasn't taken it up. A Financial Advisory Commission, I believe, took it up this week.
Yeah.
So they're meeting
not sure.
on Thursday?
They're meeting the
13th, yeah, that's next Thursday.
Yeah.
So we're waiting. Did they already take up, what is it, 017, the actual budget?
07?
07? Aren't they on the list, the financial
I
advisory?
think they took
Yeah,
up the CIP, but not the budget.
They submitted their comments, I believe.
Which means it's not going to be on for Mondays either if we're waiting for financial advisory.
Yeah.
The fact.
The Financial Advisory Commission opinion is posted in Legistar for 0724.
It is, okay.
Yes.
You said it's on their agenda?
No,
No. It's already posted.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
I was at that meeting, I should know. but I
So
don't
the
remember.
only thing that is waiting for their recommendation is 09.
Is the negotiated agreements.
And the negotiated agreements.
Yeah, I don't believe 09 is actually goes through them. Let me
The
verify
fact is
that.
listed as someone to whom to refer it.
Okay.
Can you pull up their agenda for the 13th, please? I know you can do it, I doubt I could.
And quickly she could do it. So we can take our action, and that's one less piece that has to be put together. Alderman Chandler?
I think that's a very good assessment, Madam Chair. Has favorable as amended been recommended yet?
I think so, but you may make that motion.
I'll make the motion for the first time or maybe the second time. I don't know.
What was? I'm
As
sorry, I
amended.
missed-
I think you made the motion to approve 09 as
As
amended.
amended.
Correct,
I did,
yes.
Yeah. And it was seconded properly. So further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay,
Okay.
we are efficient today?
Yeah. Okay, the next item is R 1924 East Point Choice Neighborhood Initiative Transformation. Alderman Arnett, you probably know the most about this because you've probably been to every one of their meetings.
I have. So I will start by saying I strongly support the Choice Neighborhood Initiative. I think it's an initiative that is doing a lot of very good things. However, I do have some concerns about this resolution, and we have been raising these same concerns at the Environmental Matters meeting. And there are two. One is the extreme lack of knowledge about the nature of the environmental hazards on that portion of the the old Public Works facility on Spa Road. The Director of Public Works told us at the Environmental Matters that they had done core sampling at the ball fields, but they had not done any core samplings where the residential structures were to be placed. And I don't think we can be taking any action with this property, whether it's for CNI or anything else, until we know what the environmental hazard is. And we certainly, if the environmental hazard is what it might be, which is jeopardizing the health and well-being of any resident placed on that, we would want to know. And we would certainly want to know what kind of, if habitation were to go there, what kind of liability we're exposing ourselves to, legal liability. So that's one point. The second point is there are very specific land use rules in the COMAR, the state, for surplusing property. This, if you're on page 3, line 3, this says approve the use of the public works property. And it is vague as to what that means. If we were to surplus the property, that would mean that we would have to have 2 property assessments at a minimum, and those assessments would indicate the value of the property that we're surplusing. Most assuredly, in those assessments, they would take up the impact and liability of the environmental hazard there, if there should be. But I understand that the administration is thinking rather to retain this property and rent it as a ground lease to the housing authority. I don't have a problem with that per se, but I would certainly like to know how we're going to do that and what we're going to be charging for the ground rent. I have a bet it'll be $1 a year for 99 years, but I haven't heard anything. And so I would submit these are 2 very major deficits in this resolution that I personally, and I would think the council, should be loath to approve until we get some of those answers. I did talk to the director of the Housing Authority, trying to find out how quickly they need this, because they most definitely, for the CNI process, need to know that there's strong local government support. And we have some money in the budget, $2 million, I believe, for some dollar supports, essentially donating this land to the Housing Authority, which I just can't imagine that isn't 10 or 20 or maybe even $100 million worth of value without environmental hazard. That's a big piece of property, and as we all know, property is expensive. So I would argue that would indicate some pretty strong support. But we don't have any of those kinds of details referenced here. It's sort of like pass it and we'll tell you what you did later on when we figure it out. Now, I think we need to ask, and we did ask in Environmental Matters, the administration to come back with some more information. I will add just one last piece. The Director of Public Works said that the Maryland Department of the Environment is doing a hazard study. That hazard study is supposed to be available sometime before the end of this year. I was told winter time, that's a 3-month period, and I would think that we certainly would want to wait for that. What I learned from the Director of Housing is that they really need to have this commitment locked up by no later than the middle of next year. Meaning we do have, if that is a correct statement, and we need to know that too, we do have some time to figure these things out. So I would argue that we need to postpone action on this until we have more information on the environmental hazard and more information on what is meant by use of the public utility property, public works property.
Alderman Schenemeyer?
I have thoughts, but I also want to see if Ms. Buckland has answers before I share my thoughts.
So the one comment I will make is that it's my understanding that the question of the environmental hazard of the site depends upon the intended use of it. And so, I think that the direction folks are proceeding is under the assumption, looking at potential hazards, under the assumption that it would be used for housing, which is the strictest of the environmental assessments that are done. But just to note that that answer does depend upon the use to which you are putting the land, right? It's not essentially one answer.
Correct. And if I may, Madam Chair. So Mr. Vogel spoke to that specifically.
Yeah.
We had the CNI package, and it showed where they were thinking of putting the housing, and he told us they had not done core samples there. So they don't know the level of hazard and the
In the
MDEs
past,
do. Pardon me?
correct. In the past, they had not done. Correct. In the
They have done
existing-
core samples, but they didn't do it in that part of the parcel. They did it where the ball fields are, and those did in fact come back with heavy metals and other carcinogenic materials, and said that there would have to be some remediation. In terms of the ball fields, that remediation was explained to us as being fairly minimal. It's capping the space so there's not emissions coming out and keeping any of the heavy metals from coming up and making contact with the ball players. For residences, particularly where they're going to be penetrating to do foundations and things like that, that, as you said, has a much higher standard and a much more testing, and that has not been done, according to the director. It is going to be done by the Maryland Department of Environment, but it has not been done yet.
So are we prepared, well, before I ask that question, I'm looking at, it says the city of Annapolis, Spa Road Property Environmental City Council. Is there an organization other than CNI who's been, there's a presentation here. I'm not familiar with who they are.
So that's MDE. That's the cleanup program. And there's a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 has to do with the ball fields. Phase 2 would be the segment of the property where the housing is to be located. So if you flip down to page, doesn't tell us the page number, subject property, I think that's the parts of the property that are outlined in yellow on that particular picture. And that's where the phase 2 soil testing and air sampling will be done by MDE.
Well, you were asking the question about the sampling. And would this suggest, their presentation suggests that they have already taken samples of the area that's outlined? I know they've done Williams-Whalen, and that's been added in red, so we will not miss that. But any indication from this presentation that they've crossed the street to the other side?
From Environmental Matters and the Director of Public Works, we were told they have not yet done that.
But we didn't have this presentation for Environmental Matters.
Well, I had it.
Well, you're special, so the rest of us
Well, I
didn't
made
have
it a
it.
point to get it.
And that's why I'm asking you
Yeah.
these questions, because,
Yeah.
Page 13 of that presentation shows proposed sampling locations. And so what you see there are proposed sampling locations that are across both sides of the road.
okay. So on page 13, they have taken samples
No.
of all over
No,
the
they're-
property.
They're proposed.
They have not yet sampled.
Proposed
They're just-
sampling
yeah.
locations,
Right.
yes, okay.
So I guess the bottom line for me is, and I do want to hear Alderman Chandelmar's questions and observations. I am very much in support of the general notion of this resolution. I am petrified of the notion of putting human beings on top of toxic areas. And I think that even beyond our fiduciary responsibilities as elected officials, our moral responsibility is to make sure that we're not putting people in jeopardy. And that is information that we're in the process of obtaining. We'll do the evaluation. I will tell you that I spoke to former Public Works Director David Gerald many years ago now, at least 2, and the remediation could be a fairly simple remove a foot of earth, put clay down, and a membrane over it, which would be expensive, but not if we had to do something like go down 10 feet and carry that soil. And the most expensive part of that is that soil just cannot be carried away to someplace. It has to go to special designated hazardous material areas, I think the closest of which is in North Carolina, closest to us. So it would be an expensive proposition. I think that it is the city's responsibility. We created the problem. We cannot pass the cost of that remediation on to the housing authority, which doesn't have the money to do the remediation. So we really need to find out what needs to be done and how we're going to get that done.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I have been fighting for years for Williams Whalen Field, as you know, and still don't have a resolution there. And we know that we can cap the field, but now it's with what material? So I totally understand. Alderman Shannemeyer, are you ready to make any sort of motion?
Not quite yet, but I just do want to put my 2 cents in here. I understand the need to try and tread carefully on environmental remediation. Seeing as we don't have anyone from the Housing Authority or anyone else here stressing that we have to pass this here today, I think your assessment of we can wait a little bit is fine. What I will comment on is when you mentioned the vagueness for like the use of the facility, I do think that actually helps us a little bit by keeping it a little more flexible. We have opportunity to come up with a project that can adapt to the ground situation as we learn more information on that. And that's all I have to say. So having said that, I guess I'd make a motion to postpone action on R1924.
Second.
Okay, further
But I wanted to say, I
discussion.
think Alderman makes an excellent point. We really, you took hearsay from me, or you may not have taken it, but I provided hearsay. We ought to have the director from the Housing Authority in to tell us exactly what they need and when they need it, sooner rather than later. I would suggest that we ask for that at the next meeting or the meeting after that, because time is a wasting, and these things can just lag on until we find out it's too late.
I do agree with that. I think having a very hard timeline would be helpful. Even if let's say what you said, where we have until next summer to get this done, I would still rather get this done sooner than later. But I think waiting a hearing to hear from the Housing Authority is pretty reasonable, and that can help us get some potential answers for environmental remediation factors, because we don't want to put folks on toxic materials. Once we get that information and what steps we got to take, then we can get down to it.
It has an added benefit, and it lets Melissa know that we are paying attention, we're concerned, but also we want to know what she needs from us. So the motion was moved and seconded to postpone.
Yes, let me ask Kalen. Kalen, did we not invite the Director of Public Works here today? No? Well, I think he should be also present for that discussion with the Executive Director of the Housing Authority. Oh, it's on the agenda for, is she on the agenda for environmental matters?
Yeah, maybe we could even do a joint meeting.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That might be more efficient.
If we are not able to, if I am not able to attend a joint meeting just due to, day jobs. So if that comes up, I would personally like us to invite the housing director and the public works director here. I don't know if the planning and zoning director wants to get involved too. The trifecta of housing people.
Why not the chair of the housing committee?
Yeah,
And Mike Malinoff, just for fun. I like his face.
And the mayor.
And the mayor.
We want the mayor.
I want the mayor. I want a panel of the 5 of them at that table.
well, all that to say, we're going to postpone action on, what is it, R 1924.
Can we say to no later than our September meeting?
When's our next meeting?
Well,
Oh, you're not here
I'm
for
going
the
to be in
next.
Ireland,
Okay,
So you want to do it
September.
Okay. and it's-
September.
Oh.
And I
then
assume
we should
this
have a
isn't
better
timely.
fix.
Madam Chair, if I may, with the knowledge that this is going to be in September, when would a proposed joint meeting be?
But we'd have to set that up.
If
It would be after the first week, I would assume, of September. It's a holiday week.
so, we couldn't get anything in July then.
Ross, you can join virtually.
Ross,
From Dublin?
Well, but how long are you away? Could it be after?
I'm
You
away
return.
from the last week of June through until the first council meeting in July.
Man,
Hey,
The timeline of September makes me nervous. What I would ask is we try to find something in July if we can
so
accommodate
maybe we
everyone.
can make the joint meeting with one of the other committee meeting times in July.
Yes, that is what I would like to see. I just,
For environmental matters, July.
Okay,
yeah, that's,
okay.
yeah, I hear what you're saying.
yeah, September just seems late. Even if it gets
Yeah.
into that, I would rather get a meeting going, so I feel like we have a little more momentum going through the August recess.
So is the July Environmental Matters meeting already on the schedule?
No, I will have to do it when I get downstairs.
Okay, but you're saying that we could potentially make that a joint meeting?
Yes.
Or the Rules Committee to make it a joint meeting?
Your July rules meeting will be before the city council, the first city council meeting in July, but environmental matters is after. So you guys can have the joint meeting on their date.
Well, if we want to get it on the agenda in July, then we would ask Environmental Matters if they would move their meeting up to our
But I
time.
won't be here, and I'm on both of the.
I thought you,
No, y'all are the committee. It would just be Brooks at it.
It's just
Rob
me.
And Rob. That's it,
but
'cause
Ross
y'all-
is not here.
I won't be here for the July rules meeting.
Right, but for environmental matters is already here. So all
When
we have to do is
does
get
an-
Rob's get the approval to do the joint meeting.
When is environmental matters?
It
In
is
July?
The 11th, July 11th. We'll be back.
Yep.
So all we have to do is
I will try my best to
Okay.
shift around. Worst case scenario, I'll tune in virtually.
you can join virtually.
July
if you need to.
11th is the date she's looking at.
I will try to shift my work from home schedule around. Worst case scenario, I join virtually from Washington,
Do you
D.C.
think Dewan would want to be at this meeting too?
Let's invite him.
Committee?
Yeah,
He likes this stuff.
Yeah.
okay. So we're going to invite the director of the Housing Authority, we're going to invite the director of our Public Works, and
Planning and zoning.
Planning Director, and
And
Alderman.
Brian Adams.
And
Brian
Alderman, and Brian Adams, why we invite him? He's our tree guy.
Search we got.
Anyone else we want to invite? Let's invite a food truck too. You know?
So make it a party. We should invite Felicia so we can close the street down.
Let's just make a festival of it.
You know, we need to stop before it becomes,
I'm having a good time just keeping this going.
yes, so. Okay, but we do have a motion on the floor. It has been seconded that we postpone action
To July 11th,
until July 11th.
and that we will.
No,
seek a
we'll say
joint
no
meeting.
later than July 11th
And that we will seek a joint meeting with.
with the Environmental Matters
That's what I
Committee.
put.
Yep.
And we have all of the guests that we would like to invite.
Aye.
Okay?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have to say you do very efficient work. Look at this, it's just two.
All in an hour. And we planned a party in the interim. I mean, we can multitask. All right. This is all good.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn then, if there's nothing else really good of the order.
Second?
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The meeting's adjourned.
I have something for the